Hi all. In this lecture we will see about software reuse. So we know that software products are expensive to develop. So so what organization try to do is we try to reduce the cost of the software development, how to cut this development cost. So the best way to cut this or reduce this development cost is to reuse some parts of previously developed software. So if we have similar software that was developed in previous in the previous phase development and all, if we have some kind of software that was developed by a company, we can use the components of that software. So we call that component based software engineering. So in order to reduce this development cost, usually what managers try to do is they try to use the components that were already developed in previous softwares and use it for the next softwares. So whenever we develop these softwares, we try to find out which all components can be reused in future, and we all add all these components to some central repository. So when people or developers try to code something, they can simply search in the repository and they could find whether that component is already available. If so, they can simply copy and paste that code into their software. So there are different kinds of components that can be used. So in order to reduce, when we use this software when we try to use this software reuse, then we can reduce the development cost, we can reduce the development time, and also higher quality of the developed products, because since we are using already developed component and which that component is already being run in some other software, so if there are some bugs in that software, all those bugs will be deleted or will be eliminated, and these components will be bug free, so we can directly use. So the software that is being developed now will be of higher quality because we are using the components that is already run by in some other software. So which all components can be reused? So we can reuse any of the artifacts. So there are different artifacts that can be reused. So we can use this requirement specification document. We can use this design document, the code, then the test cases that are generated, the knowledge. So knowledge can also be reused. So if you have developed some software and the experience can be used, the experience of the developer can be used while we try to develop similar field software in the future. So that is known as a knowledge reuse. So we can use knowledge reuse also. So but it is very difficult to extract and document that reusable knowledge. So we need to extract and document that reusable knowledge, then only we can reuse it. So what knowledge, which knowledge and what knowledge can be reused should be found out, and it should be extracted and it should be documented properly, then only some other software developers can use that knowledge. So all these years now, software development has gone to component-based software development. So all the organizations, if you take large organizations, they might have developed different kinds of software in their organization, and those most of the softwares they are developing nowadays are repetition of the old softwares that are developed, similar softwares that have been developed in the previous years. So what they do is they add all these components in a repository. All these are known as components. So all these components will be added in the repository. And if we are going to develop a new software, what we do is we try to find out which all components are already existing in our repository, and we try to use all those components as such, so that coding will be reduced tremendously, and this maintenance effort will be reduced because most of the bugs will be cleared in all those uh, things that are being reused. Then we will see the basic issues in any reuse program. So there are some basic issues that can happen in this reusability. So one is what all things that we should notice. First one is component creation. So we have to create these components. So we will see each one separately. Component creation. Okay, I will see that component creation. So component creation is we have to identify which all components can be reused. So when we are developing a software, if we are developing a new software, we have to see that software project managers will see which all components can be reused in future. So we have to find out all those components, and we have to create such a component creation repository. So we try to find out which all components that can be used while we develop the software itself. So those components will be created and will be added. So when we create that, it should be a generalized thing. So we modify that component so that it can support in future softwares also. So we create components, then we have to provide this component indexing and searching mechanism. So indexing is needed because we tomorrow some other developer will be searching for this reusable component. So there should be some indexing mechanism so that he could easily search this, he could easily find out this thing. So we have to index it, and we have to store that component in the central repository. Some object oriented database or rdbms software will be using to store all these components. Then there should be facility for component searching. So the programmers need to search for the right components to get the from the database. So the programmers, there should be an efficient searching method so that they can easily search for a particular component. That component understanding, the programmers need to understand what the component is. There should be proper documentation of the component. Then only the programmers will understand what a component is all about. So it should be properly documented. Then component adapt adaptation. So we need to adapt the components. So these reusable components may not be used as such in the software development. We may have to modify it, we may have to make some changes in the component, and we have to use it for the software. So component adaptation mechanism should be there. Then a repository should be maintained. So we have mentioned that there should be a central repository so that anyone can say, search and find out these components. So repository should be maintained properly. Newer applications, when newer applications are developed, we have to add new components into it. And if we want to delete some older components we can remove. There should be facility to remove that older or obsolete components also. So these are the issues in reuse. Next is we'll see a reuse approach, how to use this reusability in an organization. So domain analysis is an approach to identify these reusable components. We will see this domain analysis. So it is a method to identify the reusable components for a problem domain. So it identifies objects, operations, and relationships among them. So it will basically find out which all things that can be used for component, which all things can be added as components. So so when the company is developing different banking software or business software or manufacturing automation or any kind of software, he has to find out which all common components will be there, which all components that can be used in future. For example, the login module. So if we create a login screen, that login module will be used by different software. So we can add it into the repository for that. That common characteristics or similarity between systems are generalized. So if there are common characteristics between different systems, we have to find out those similarities, and it should be generalized so that it can be used by any of the softwares. So evolution of reuse domain. So evolution, there are four stages of evolution for this. So in stage one, there won't be any clear or there won't be any consistent set of notation. There won't be any reusable components at all. So what we will rewrite some software. That's all. Then in stage two, we have some experience in developing some similar projects in the past. So what we do is we use that experience to develop a new software. Then that is known as knowledge reuse, because we are using the knowledge from the previous project to develop a new software. So this is known as stage 2 of reuse domain. Then there is stage 3. Here the domain is ripe for use. That means we have already developed some concepts, and all those notations are standardized, and what we do is we have some components and knowledge, so we try to use that knowledge and component again for developing new softwares. Then we have the fourth stage. Here the domain has been fully explored. That means everything will be automated. We try to find out all the components, we try to add new components to the software, and we have some tools, we have some application generator, and all these things are there. So this is the stage 4. So this uses reusability to the maximum. Then we need to classify these components need to be classified. So we have a method known as Pareto classification scheme. So in order to effectively index and in order to effectively store this, we need to classify these components into different types. So there are different types of components. So we need to classify into different types of this component. So we have a method known as Pareto DAS classification scheme. Here, what is done is each component is best characterized, is described using a number of different characteristics of facets. So, for example, what we do is objects can be classified using the following. This is an example. So, actions they embody, or the objects they manipulate, or data structures that are used, or the systems they are part of, etc. Based on this, we can classify the objects into different components. So, based on this is a simple example. So, if you want to classify objects into different components, what you have to do is we have to find out what all actions each object will do. If there is some similarity between this, then they can be classified into this thing. So this is a facets by Pareto facets classification, faceted classification. So we have there are several advantages for this thing also. So this is just for knowledge. You need not learn much about this classification scheme and all. So there is some method to classify this components into different types. Then there should be some searching mechanism. So there should be a proper searching mechanism. Then only a component can be found out. Then there should be repository maintenance. We have already discussed this thing, and also reuse without modification should be done available, because if there is several amount of effort is needed to reuse a component, that is if you want to modify the component as a whole and if you want to change everything, then it is not good practice. So what we have to do is we have to reduce that modification task, then only that reusability and the effort will be reduced. So next is reuse at organization level. So what all things that should be practiced in order to do this reusability in an organization level? So mainly we have three steps. First is assessing a product's potential for reuse, then refining products for greater reusability, and enter the product in the reuse repository. So these are the three levels that an organization should do. First one is assessing a product's potential for reuse. So the firm should be able to assess whether whether an item has reusability feature. So for that, a questionnaire will be prepared by the organization. So organization will give a questionnaire to the program managers or the developers. So they have to answer that questionnaire. So whenever they develop some software, this questionnaire will also be circulated so that they, when they answer this questionnaire, they will be able to know that whether this component can be reused in the future. So these are some of the questions that will be asked. So these are some general questions. So is the component's functionality required for implementation of systems in the future? Then how common is the component's function within its domain? Would there be a duplication of functions within the domain if the component is taken up? Is the component hardware dependent? Is the design of the component optimized enough? One more thing is there, if the component is non-reusable, and then can it be decomposed to suit some reusable component? Then like that, there will be some questionnaires that will be prepared by the organization and will be given to the people, so that they will, when they answer these questions, they will know, they can assess whether that component can be used for reuse, has any potential for reuse. So in this way they circulate this questionnaire. Then the next step what they do is, uh, so this is another question: is the design of the component optimized is enough? If the component is not reusable, then can it be decomposed to yield some reusable components? Can we parameterize non-reusable components so that it becomes reusable? Like the different questions will be given. So by asking these questions, we can assess whether it has potential for reuse. Then in the second step, what they do is refining products for greater usability. So after we have identified that there are components that can be used in the future, we have to refine those products. We have to refine those components so that greater it will support greater usability, because if we are developing some college automation software and if we have found out that component, so that component itself won't be added to the repository. We will make some changes to the component so that it is much generalized, so that other softwares can also use this component. So we can have this generalization. So there are different types of generalizations or refinements that we carried out. Maybe name generalizations. So we try to use name, say, all the variable names in a generalized manner. Then operations that are supported should be generalized. Then exception generalization should be there. Whatever exceptions it might generate, there should be a common exception mechanism. Then handling portability problems. So all this portability, if we want to port from one system to another system, one operating system, or from one hardware to another hardware, all these portability problems should be addressed when you refine these products for supporting this reusability. So that's all. Then we have how to improve this reusability for this portable interface. So there is a architecture for that. So the portability issue can be overcome if we have a architecture like this. So what we have, it is we have the application system, we have a portability interface, and we have operating system and IO calls and data refers. So what we do is, if the software, if the component has some operating system and IO calls, all these things, and also that abstract versions of this, data references and all these things will be hidden, because there is a portability interface here which interacts with the application system. So we did not understand what is the underlying mechanism happening inside all these things. It is hidden from the application system. So if we provide this interface, then more there that portability issue can be solved, because application system does not know anything about this interface and all. It simply processes the outer part. So everything portability will be handled by this interface. So this is how we can improve the reusability of a component by including this interface. So in order to include this reusability, the top management of an organization should support this. Then only this reusability should be there. Then there should be proper documentation. That is another thing that should be there. Then there should provide some additional incentive to the programmers to contribute to the component based development. Otherwise, this won't be any use. So all this will support the increase of software usability, and thereby we can increase the component based software development. So this is a software that is a model that is being used by many organizations nowadays. The companies, the organizations won't develop a software from the scratch. They try to reuse which all the components that are available in their firm. So that's all about software reusability. Thank you.